Hey, this is Ishar, and in today's talk, what I want to go over is how the practice of meditation can help transform your existing personality type traits. And in this model, I'll be going over the Big Five personality type test, although there may be other personality type models you can use when really studying yourself and understanding the effects of meditation on your life. So, going over the Big Five personality type traits, there are five, as you can tell, traits that make up the Big Five. And these are number one, openness, number two, conscientiousness, number three, extroversion, number four, agreeableness, and lastly, you have neuroticism. So I'll just do a quick recap of each of these individual traits, and then I'll be going over how meditation can really transform where you fit within the spectrum of these traits. So starting off with openness, as the name implies, this means that you're open to new experiences and you have more of a bigger picture way of thinking if you're very high in this trait. And conversely, if you score very low in openness, this means that you prefer a tried and true routine and you aren't really open to new possibilities, but rather you like to stick with what works for you. And a lot of people who score very low in openness make for actually good business managers and people who uphold systems and also uphold traditions as well. So they already know what works. They don't need to reinvent the wheel. And they're very happy kind of doing the same thing over and over again if it works. So they're all about efficiency and kind of upholding certain things. And they move at a very slower pace compared to people who are very high in openness, who are kind of all over the place at times. I know whenever I've taken these, tests, I've scored between 95 to 99 percentile in openness. So definitely very high in this aspect. And people who are very high in openness like to seek out different things, and they have a bigger picture way of thinking. And they're also the lifestyle may reflect that. And I'll be going over that in a bit. Now, the next quality is conscientiousness. And this basically refers to your discipline and work ethic and also your ambitions as well. So people who score very high in this trait are, big thinkers. They want to accomplish a lot in life. So someone like Kobe Bryant, the late Kobe Bryant, who would fit in this, where they had big dreams. You just want to accomplish more, and people would describe you as a type A personality if you score very high in this. If you're very low in this trait, you tend to be a bit more chill, more go with the flow. Working hard and accomplishing a lot of things just isn't a priority for you. You tend to kind of just go with life and go with the flow. The next trait is extroversion. And if you score high in this, you'd be a very social person, someone who could be described as an extrovert. And you gain energy through interacting with people, and you are very social. So you really seek out connections with others, and extroverts can also handle a lot more stimulus from their external environment compared to introverts. So introverts are people who are lower in this spectrum. And again, this is a spectrum because not everyone is either 100% extrovert or 100% introvert. So there is a gradient within the scale. And, where you fall within this can also really inform your life as well. So after extroversion, you have agreeableness. And this is how, basically the capacity to seek social harmony. So people who score high in this trait really value their personal connections. They're also described as very polite, accommodating, very patient. And people who score very low in this are kind of the people that are very hard to get along with. They can be described as difficult personalities. They can be rude, can be brash, and there are also some pros and cons to being both very low in agreeableness and also being very high in it. Because if you're very high in this, you may also tend to get yourself involved in people-pleasing behaviors or put other people over yourself. And if you score very low in this, well, you may ruin a lot of relationships, but people who score very low in this trait can also experience things like more personal power. They can be also respected more in some aspects, and they also tend to earn a lot more than people who are higher in agreeableness. And then lastly, you have neuroticism, which is how prone you are to afflictive mental states such as stress, anxiety, depression. So people who are low in this trait tend to be just go with the flow, very chill. They don't get panicked or rocked off center very easily. And people who are very high in this trait are constantly like, oh, like worried all the time. And I'm sure you know a lot of these types of people. So now that we just understand this recap of the big five personality type traits, how can we see how meditation can transform our qualities? So the nice thing about meditation is that it amplifies your existing personality type traits and transforms them into a more positive version. However, meditation doesn't completely uproot your natural tendencies and your temperaments. So if you're naturally just a bit more chill, introverted, you're all of a sudden not going to be this hyperactive person that wants to do a lot of things. Likewise, if you tend to be a bit more closed off and reserved, you're not going to be this open-minded person that wants to do a lot of drugs and explore and do all that as well. So where you fall within this spectrum kind of stays somewhat stable and throughout your life. So there will be fluctuations and times where you fall on the spectrum will shift. But if you look at it from a long-term perspective, it remains somewhat stable. So when we look at these traits, we can see how meditation may transform let's just say, a negative version of where you fall on that trait into a more positive one. So what do I mean by this? So if we look at the first trait of openness, so someone who is very low on this side could be described as maybe a bit more closed off, more reserved, and a bit more conservative. Now, from a negative aspect, if they maybe before their meditation practice, they could be described as someone who's very rigid, maybe even a bit stubborn. They never want to do anything new, and this could be to the chagrin of people around them. And this could also manifest as judgmental behavior. So people who are very low in openness may have a tendency to judge others. So if they're coming from their ego and from separation, how this manifests in their behaviors is they would not be willing to tolerate other people's views or perspectives because in essence, they're closed off and less open. Now, what meditation will do is over time, you become just a bit more open, but you can also, you naturally won't transform into this like total free love hippie person if that's not your personality type. So if you look at someone who is very low in openness in the meditation community, this would be the late S.N. Goenka. And, there's a lot of Vipassana centers all over the world because of him. And he would be described as someone who is very low in openness. And he was also a businessman before he started this meditation journey. So his personality remained true. And how meditation, I see how it transformed him, is he was able to uphold the values of Vipassana and uphold these ancient teachings that have been around for thousands of years and was able to convey that and not deviate from it. So he wasn't reinventing the wheel or doing anything just out there, but rather he was being very steady, grounded, and stable in upholding his values. And many of his students, may say that, okay, at times he's a bit stubborn in his standards, but you can't deny the fact that he was, a good teacher and he was able to guide his students in a certain way. So if you're very low in openness, your rigidity, so to speak, would be transformed into upholding certain values and upholding certain traditions and trying to tell people what works and what has worked for you and what has worked for others and upholding that tradition. And this is actually a very positive thing. And also you'll find that people who are very low in openness, gradually as a result of their meditation, their judgments and discriminations will start to drop away. And now let's look at the other side. So someone who is very high in openness. So a perfect example of this would be the late Ram Dass. He was very high in openness. He was experimenting with psychedelics in the 60s and he changed his name and he was just really out there as far as openness. And he kind of remained true to himself and his personality before enlightenment and after enlightenment. So that hasn't shifted. Now, how does this particular quality change as you meditate more? So this is something I can give a personal example for, since I score somewhere between 95 and 99 percentile in openness. So I'm extremely high in this quality. So what I've noticed for this is that in my life, I've been very open to experiences and possibilities. So, every few years I'd move cities. I had like over 30 jobs before I was 25. I just changed jobs all the time. I want to try new industries, new fields. So that was how I was open in my workplace and lifestyle wise. And then when it came to relationships, I'd be a serial dater. I'd love to, meet different women. And what I noticed is before I'd start this meditation journey, it came from a place of ego. So I wanted to move because I wanted to prove myself, and I wanted to change and do all these things which were coming from my place of ego. Or I want to change jobs because I want to do the best or something like that, right? It's coming from a personal striving, right? And then when it came to relationships, I'd be like a womanizer who'd want to go on different dates, and it was coming from a place of lack. And also, I would realize that I was coming from a place where I wasn't very empathetic to the people that I was meeting, and it seemed like I was treating them like objects. When I was when a teenager and very early 20s. So as meditation has kind of shifted my personality, my openness hasn't changed. So I'm still very open to ideas. I love creating these videos and coming up with new possibilities and ideas. And when I approach, say, relationships, I'm all of a sudden not this very shy person that just wants to date one person. I'm, very kind of flirty out there, but I'm coming from very positive intention. So I want to, spread joy, and I want to spread love to people. And it's not this kind of coming from a place where I want to like get more, or, go on more dates and kind of prove myself. It's coming from more of a positive aspect. So this meditation practice can really shift your negative qualities and change it into more of a positive quality, but your main personality, where you fall in the spectrum, will remain the same. So this is in openness. Now let's look at the next trait, which is conscientiousness. So someone who is very low in conscientiousness would be like a very type B personality, go with the flow. And when we look at the different traditions and different spiritual disciplines, we can look at the Taoists. So the Taoists are very have this very carefree approach where they tend to embrace a very simple, carefree lifestyle where they're not very concerned about accomplishing a lot. They embrace a lot of simplicity. And you can see this influence in Zen Buddhism also. Now, someone who is very high in this quality of conscientiousness still will want to accomplish great things and want to do more in life, but it's not coming from a place of ego. And that's kind of, if you can probably tell, this is the main takeaway from this talk, is you go from less of an ego structure to more of an open awareness, and more guided to light and openness rather than personal me and my strivings. But you can see like great leaders and visionaries fall under the spectrum where you, on some level, you have to be very conscientiousness to spread a certain message and impact people, because you have to have the work ethic in place. So someone like the Buddha would probably have been someone who's very high in conscientiousness, because he could have easily sat in enlightenment and he was fine like for the rest of his life. He could have just sat in his bliss, but he conscientiously chose to spread his teachings and actually come up with a whole list of teachings and different practices which were compiled in suttas, and upheld all these rules and traditions. So it was a lot of work, and it's something he was not adverse to. So someone who's a bit more chill and carefree type B personality would not care for doing all this work. So someone who is very high in this trait would really strive to help other people. And the emphasis is on helping other people, and they take a lot of pride in their work ethic to help other people. So that doesn't really change. Now, the next quality of extroversion. So people who are very high in this quality are very social people. And we oftentimes have this quality in our mind, or image in our mind, of someone who meditates as being this lone hermit, which I'll talk about in a sec. But with meditation, you can still be a social person and be extroverted. So that's not the case at all. And in fact, meditation will help you connect to others a bit more, especially if you're doing loving kindness practices. So I've personally noticed this myself, although I'm a very social introvert, meditation has allowed me to connect with others easily. And I actually enjoy connecting with others more than I did before. So if you're naturally very extroverted, that'll remain the same. And you'll naturally become very gregarious and still be very social. You may host a lot of events and host a lot of meetups where you can meet with other people, and that doesn't really change. And maybe whereas before, if you're very extroverted, you're constantly seeking a lot of stimulus, because that's what a lot of extroverts will naturally do, where they want to have more experiences and they're not satisfied just sitting still. They want more and more and more. Well, as you progress in your meditation journey, you'll find that the extroversion doesn't change, but instead of seeking out more stimulus and things that bombarding your senses, Instead, it's more about connecting with others and kind of engaging with life a bit more. So it's fully on engaging with life and not holding yourself back. And this is a very positive thing. Now, on the low side of extroversion, it's introversion. And the extreme end of things, you have people who would be described as loners, and they never talk to anyone, and they're maybe a little bit shy. And these could be described as maybe not the best or wholesome qualities to develop. How meditation changes you is you embrace the lifestyle of being an introvert if you are naturally very introverted. However, you're not very shy, like you're not shying away from the world, although that could be your practice. So you kind of embrace the introversion lifestyle and you kind of remain the same. So a lot of the monks that you see like living in a mountain and they're hermits were actually naturally very high in introversion even before they started their practice. And naturally, as a result of doing their practice, they kind of just go out on a mountaintop and do their own thing. And obviously, if you fall somewhere in the middle of this spectrum, you'll tend to embrace that. And how meditation will change you is you'll naturally become more become or embrace your introverted side if you're naturally more of an introvert, but you're not scared of other people. So that's one of those things that a lot of introverts will say that, hey, I'm scared to talk to other people, or I'm scared of doing this. You'll naturally gain the skills of managing your energy. And what meditation also teaches you is to find fulfillment from within. So you completely embrace being an introvert, but you can also talk to other people. Now, the next quality is agreeableness. So this is how much you value social ties, how patient and accommodating you are. And naturally, meditation does make you more agreeable. It makes you more kind, more patient, more generous. But of course, you've definitely seen different meditation teachers who are very rude, who are very demanding, who are very stubborn. A lot of Zen masters are like this, where you've met a lot of them that are kind of very stern and demanding, and they expect a lot of you. And if you score very low in agreeableness, you tend to be a bit more standoffish, maybe a bit more rude at times, and these would be the negative aspects of things. Now, as you meditate more, you don't all of a sudden become Mother Teresa and you hug people. That doesn't really happen. But you use your disagreeableness for good. And how can you do that? Well, people who are very low in agreeableness can be critical, but it gets transformed in meditation where you help others. So you're quick to point out others' mistakes, but you're able to provide them feedback on how to grow. And there's nothing greater than to hear advice from someone who is disagreeable if they're being kind, because they will not sugarcoat anything. So if they know you're doing something wrong or incorrectly, they have no problem calling you out and being honest with it. And this is actually a breath of fresh air if you're used to hanging around with a lot of very agreeable hippies and yogis, where they won't tell you anything and you're kind of confused. Well, a very disagreeable person will say, hey, you're messing up, this is what you're doing, and this is what you need to do to improve. And you may actually appreciate that advice. And of course, if they're very disagreeable, they may be very difficult at times and stubborn. And, a lot of the great Zen masters, like I was mentioning, like Dogen, who was very low in agreeableness, would fall under this category. But he was known for really vitalizing and founding the Soto Zen tradition. And if it wasn't for him, who knows, maybe the Zen tradition wouldn't be as strong today. But he was an example of a very disagreeable man who really was very influential, because disagreeable people, like to kind of like prove themselves and prove others wrong. And that's a negative aspect. But eventually over time, when it transforms, they have a capacity to help others in a lot of different ways. And if you're very agreeable, well, meditation will make you even more compassionate and more caring, and you'll see someone like the Dalai Lama or Mother Teresa fall in this category, or Thich Nhat Hanh, where their heart is just so giving and unconditional. And these are the qualities that the Brahma Viharas really point to. And these are practices of Buddhism, which the Brahma Viharas make up: loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. So a person who's very high in these qualities can really cultivate this, and comes natural to them. So you don't really have to try very hard to be compassionate or being very loving, because it comes natural to them. But one of the benefits that they learn is they learn not to be a people pleaser. They learn not to give themselves if they don't have enough for themselves. So there is compassion to oneself, and that's something that is transformed through the practice of meditation. And then lastly, we have neuroticism. So this is how prone you are to negative afflictive states. And meditation definitely improves neuroticism. So you become much less neurotic as your practice progresses. So I know when I was first starting out to meditate, when I was a young teenager, I was definitely a lot more stressed out, anxious, angsty, and even into my 20s, I was kind of an angsty kid, and I listened to rock music, and I still do. But you can kind of get in a big picture of that. And if you score very high in neuroticism, well, what you'll find is your qualities of being very stressed or very anxious all the time or having depressive moods, uh, that you won't naturally transform into like the most happy like hippie person ever. However, you can use these, let's just say, more introspective or more deeper qualities to actually touch other people in a meaningful way. And you can really see this in when you listen to a song that really touches you, or read a very deep piece of poetry, where you can really see a person's suffering come through, and it touches you in a certain way. And this is the power that people have that are pretty neurotic, is that they are able to understand the suffering of others a lot better. Because if you're naturally very peaceful, you don't get stressed out easily, and this happens as a result of meditation practice, you may lose touch with the suffering of others, and you may not be able to relate to them. And this is something that's a bit unfortunate, but you'll tend to notice this with people who've been meditating for really long, is that if they fail to develop their compassionate aspects of their personality, then they become a bit more aloof, and they're a bit removed from other people. So when someone comes to them and they're suffering and they're sad, they'll just say, "Oh, get over it," or maybe look inside and find the universe within, or something. They'll say something very vague or cryptic. And although it may make sense, it does not help the person that they're talking to. So if someone is really like suffering, they're unable to understand that because they haven't suffered in a while. So how could they really relate to them? So if you are very high in this quality, just know that your pain can actually be a gift in which you can understand others better and help transform it. But ultimately, your neuroticism will be transformed, where it'll naturally lower over time. So that's just something to keep in mind. So I hope you like this talk. I'm really interested in personality types, as you know, and also meditation. So I hope to combine these topics in the future. Thank you.